Hello, everyone. So we are live again for yet another author live chat with fan series. Tuesdays, your next page turner, 3rd May 2022, 8 p.m. CST. We are live again on our Facebook page. We're a little bit late today, waiting for our guests to come in, and we have not just the author today, but we also have his guest joining us to talk about his book. So today's author is author Kohan Killetz, and we're going to be talking about his fiction book. And we have Justin joining us to also share his experience about his book. So, when the Game of Thrones meets the Bible. So, um, about the author, a little bit about the author, right? So, the author, Kohan Killetz, is an outrageous person. In 2013, he made a feature length claymation movie, Qart Qadesh, if I'm pronouncing it right, in his dad's tiny apartment. He is a second degree black belt in an obscure Korean sword based martial art. In life, his one ambition has been to reawaken in people the love for the ancient world that drives the great men and women of history to lofty ambitions and deep empathy for their fellows. Killetz, for a young youth, is widely traveled. Morocco is his second home, and he longs for the day he can go to the lands of his ancestors in Syria and Palestine and establish for the people there a new, brighter future. So, without further ado, let's welcome author Killetz and his friend Justin to the show. Hello,
Hello,
guys. Hello. How are
Hey,
you
hey.
doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm doing really good. Justin, how are you? Thank you for joining the show as well.
Yeah, for sure. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here to talk about Killet's book, and it's always fun to have a guest joining us to talk about the author's book, because it's not just him, the author talking about the book and the experience, but it's also somebody else joining in and and sharing the experience of reading the book. So that makes a whole lot of difference to the interview session. So I'm really happy to have you here, Justin. So
Thanks.
I know that I have actually briefly kind of like introduced you. I've mentioned a little bit about yourself, Killetz, but I think it would be great to have you say a few things about yourself, something that the audience don't know, and introduce yourself a little bit.
Um, Something the audience doesn't know. Well, I think something that the audience does know is that my office is just filled to the breaking point with little clay figures of people. I, I mentioned my claymation films. I'm a little bit obsessed with making, small people, mostly historical characters. And I was sort of on the fence about whether to include these like as illustrations from my book. I'm thinking if I do, I will most likely do it in the future. But okay, so I'd rather just answer questions since I don't know where to begin with myself because I don't understand myself at all. Take 100 psychiatrists to get to the bottom of the mystery.
I can corroborate that.
now,
Yeah.
now, Justin, tell us where you're from and how you got to know Killetz, and yeah.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and that's where I'm at right now. But I first met Colette in Tucson, Arizona. We both went to the University of Arizona, which is in Tucson. Yeah, and we met in a Middle Eastern Studies course.
So, Killetz,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about. I think you have your book, right? Like going through your book, reading your book. We can sense, or probably the readers can sense, a huge affection, love that you have for the ancient history, and it is really evident, right? So, and Justin mentioning that you both went to a grad school and learning about the Middle Eastern culture. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, where does this fascination start from? And yeah.
Oh, no, my alarm is going off in the background for this interview. I think I timed it wrong. Okay, so my background in Middle Eastern studies and history, it came sort of as a long-term like love affair with, the cultures of the Levant. You know, a very deep interest in Syria, and it's interesting how that started because, in when I was growing up in the early 2000s, obviously Middle East is sort of like front and center, but my political development sort of started with, hating George Bush and the stupid invasion in Iraq. And then in 2011, there was the Syrian civil war, and also the whole thing in Israel Palestine going on in the background. And it sort of like has been a constant part of my family, in the background of my life. And I always been very interested in that. And I feel like particularly the history prior to the Islamic conquest, I think, is particularly interesting and not often covered. I mean, apart from ancient Egypt, of course, that's the big subject. But what about those civilizations that are sort of like between the other big civilizations?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's the issue of religion. All the world's major religions have some tie to the region of the Levant. Obviously, Judaism originates from Palestine, and Christianity from Palestine, and Islam was strongly influenced by Judaism and Christianity, and even Hinduism had a lot of influence from Syria, because what a lot of people don't know is that there was a kingdom called Mitanni in eastern Syria that actually were very close kin with the Vedic Indians, who ultimately invaded and settled in the Indian subcontinent. They also had some presence in Syria as well. For a while, they were the main rival of the Egyptians. And I think that deserves to be better known as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting to note that as you study deep into the ancient history, and you sort of like see the connections between people and between different countries, continents, and you explore more on that. So and I think mostly people would do this because somehow they have this connection between the place. Like, if you are interested in Middle East, like mostly people will be like fascinated because of their connections with the places, like, probably the cultural connections that they already have, and they would go and try to learn more things about their origins and things like that. So do you have um, connections with the Middle East? Like, tell us a little bit about your background and in terms of like cultural background.
So on my father's side, they are Jewish. So there's a close tie to the region of Palestine as a result. I actually have relatives in Israel as a result of that, or at least close friends of the family that sort of pass as relatives. Most of our actual relatives, they got in the 40s, but that's a story for another time. And apparently, I had an ancestor, great great grandfather, who was from Iran originally. So I was one of the Jewish community there. But I've particularly been interested in the Canaanite world and the Canaanite religion, because it's sort of like foundational to all of that. But in many ways, it's much more modern and liberated in its values than a lot of later religions. For example, women had greater equality and rights relative to in like ancient Israel and ancient Egypt, for example. It was not perfect by any means. If you read my book, it's pretty horrible. But I mean, that's history for you, and of course, it's not anything better now. It's but I do think human nature is good. I believe human nature is good. It's just that if we set up the reward systems to reward the good instead of the bad, that's kind of a theme in the book, because the sort of the reward system they have in place, it rewards bad people. The main character sort of became rich because he's like this horrible sex trafficker for the pharaoh. He brings him the virgins of his country.
Yeah.
And he gets ostentatiously wealthy from it, but then everyone hates him, unsurprisingly.
Right. I mean, so where did you get the idea of the whole plot? Because it's quite a lengthy book. It's probably, I would say, like for a fiction book, I would say that it's not a short book. I think you have like probably a little over 400 pages. So that's like quite a bit of it. You have quite a bit of substance in that book, the plot, the story, right? So tell us a little bit about how you got the idea of writing that book.
This all starts with these documents called the Elamarna letters, this cache of clay tablets that were discovered by a peasant in Egypt, not understanding their value. But then they read them and they translated them from the Akkadian language, and they found this incredible record of like diplomacy between all the powerful kings of the time and the king of Egypt, along with all of the king's Canaanite vassals. So like the history that we're putting together from these letters forms like the skeleton of the story. And then I flesh it out with, these creative ideas that are in the spirit of the time, in the spirit of the culture. So not every event in the story is historically accurate, obviously, since we don't know every detail about the history. But I tried to make it as historically authentic while also being like very, very, crazily entertaining. It's like all the crazy stuff going on.
If I can chime in for a second. Just based on my experience of the book and other books that Josh has written, I think that one thing that is very worthy of respect about his book and also his writing style and his values as manifest through the book is that as he said, there's a lot of fiction that's sort of woven into like the historical backdrop of how the story's frame, or how the book's story evolves. But as he said, a lot of the feel of it and a lot of the content of the fictional elements is still very in line with what you'd imagine life was like back in those times. So the people are not acting fictional in a way that's like, oh, that's made up. It's fictional in the sense of embellishing story, getting close to details that you couldn't have known because we live now and we don't live back then, but still details that make the historical elements more rich and more sort of comprehensible, given that we're living now, So yeah, I think that the fictional aspects most certainly shouldn't deter anybody. They should only kind of build up the appeal of the book, because they're still real in that way. So
you can learn a lot from the stuff that I make up.
Yeah.
Because what I make up is stuff that actually happened at other times. I try to condense it so you get a good sense of human nature. Right. And maybe it's sounding so lofty and dry at the 400 pages. I remember watching the movie Amadeus, and he was complaining about all those operas that are so lofty they shit marble, and it's not like that.
Yeah.
It shits shit.
No, it's crazy.
People are like real people. They make horrible jokes. It's very crude in many places. Some people, have reasonable, relationships with each other. It's not. It feels true to human nature is the point.
I mean, I certainly agree with Justin's point of view, because I think the book, I mean, anyone who reads the book will think that, it's too graphic. It's sometimes it's a little bit more. I mean, now since we are living in this modern world, we would think that, I mean, with all these equalities, and we have fairly attain women's rights, and things like that. We are somehow very much progressed, as opposed to the time that you wrote the book. The time frame that you were focusing on in the book. I think it would be a little bit difficult for people now to view it, or to even digest what's going on. But I think, like Justin said, like, it's fake, or probably it's fiction, only in the storyline, or how, things, the names, probably, those kind of things are fiction. But
No, the names are all real practically.
Mhm.
Almost every character in the book. I made up a few of them just because, women exist in history, but sometimes their names are not recorded. Like, for example, the King Milky-Lu, his wife was the daughter of another king called Tagi. And she doesn't have any name in the sources, but obviously she must exist. And I thought, what would be an interesting, to show her perspective. I mean, that's another thing I like to show, the perspectives of like subaltern people, the people who are not often talked about in history.
Yeah.
Like,
So
for
you see.
example, like one of the main protagonists, Sutarna, is LGBT, well, the G of the LGBT. He's quite gay, and he's still, just like every other man of his time. He's like, he's a warlord. He fights and kills like everyone else, and he has his own unique personality. He's not just limited to being the gay guy. It's just coincidentally, he, as throughout all history, he's, there are people who prefer the company of males. And I thought that would be an interesting thing to explore, especially since it's a taboo topic in the Middle East. But of course, it's going on. It's like even in Saudi Arabia, where you can get punished by execution for, sodomy. It's happening all the time because men and women are not really allowed to spend time together. So they just do it with men, and men are more often like men and boys. That's sort of how things are and how things work. I wanted to show some of that as well.
And yeah, I think yeah. So you see, you have got like that much of substance in that story, and just probably fiction is just about how you develop the story. But apart from that, I think a lot of it is actually from real resources and inspiration from real incidents, right? So how did your studies, like you did your studies in the Middle Eastern culture, right? In order to learn more about the cultural aspects of it. So how did that help you to explore more about cultures, and to write books? Like, I'm sure you would have gone through a lot of reading materials throughout your studies, and I think that would have prompted you to or probably steered you to the right direction in researching for your story. So tell us a little bit about that experience.
The thing about the research is you kind of just lived the research for many, many years. I think Justin can tell you that I've always been obsessed with all this Canaanite stuff. I think it was around just shortly after I finished, this animated series. It has a very similar story to the book called Bronze, but it's just sort of like incoherent because it's this show so short and it doesn't give you the context. It's hard to tell what's going on. Whereas the book, I tried to explore the context, but it's based about the same real history of the Amarna period. What was I gonna say? What was it? What was the question again?
I mean, like, how did your studies, like, the research, and how did that actually help you to come up with this book? Like, did you ever get inspiration?
I like to say that I kind of live, this culture, about, all the Canaanite things. I play the same musical instruments they play, such as this one, the lyre. And I have enough understanding, like in the background, I was thinking about an acquaintance of mine who wrote a screenplay about the same culture, the Phoenician culture, and it's very clear he just used a random name generator on the internet for his Phoenician characters. Well, I have, about, I don't know, 10, 15, between 10 and 12 years experience with this language, so that I know what names sound right, what sounds that they have in the language. So it's very hard to tell, I think, with mine, what characters I made up and which characters are just real characters. To sort of give the impression of some of these crazy names that these are not real people. I just made them up, but no, they're completely real people. Melkilu was real person. Labayu, Zamarada, Amenhotep, all these people are real people. And I don't want to. Obviously, though, what's known about these Canaanite kings is really from only what they wrote about themselves and what their enemies wrote about them. So we have, and establishing chronology is also quite hard with these sources. So I just sort of wrote an interesting story using, it's. I mean, obviously, I kind of like get upset because I make mistakes, as just like anyone else, and I try to correct them as I can. Like, for example, when I made the film version, I didn't realize that Milkilu at one point was on the same side as Labayu, so I had to correct it. The book was turned out to be a big plot point.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the research is the foundation, but I think the creativity is what makes it literature, And knowing enough about history, like in a broad sense, allows me to pick different flavors and spices to put into it.
Yeah, because I wanted to just comment that so me and Josh lived together for about a year, and it's really an understatement to say that in many ways he lives his passion for the history that founds the book and his other films and other writings, because I mean his day-to-day involvement in all of these ancient texts and all of the modern renditions of these ancient texts and research is really kind of outstanding. Like, I've never met anybody who sort of just casually lives in these sources of knowledge. And so even if the book is based on kind of the not so stable bones of the records that we have from these kings and how they thought of themselves and how their enemies thought of them, just the historical knowledge that fills in all of the gaps, from those regions where the books originally take place, like Palestine and the Levant, but also just the broader scene, Northern Africa, say, or anywhere else historically around the world that has had an influence. He's already got that kind of context, so the story ends up still being being very kind of robust and believable, although it's fiction.
I have lived in Morocco for about a year, or twice. and it adds up to being about a year and a month. And the experience of living like that and living with a family, a more conservative, traditional family, has influenced my work in many, many ways. They actually think I don't speak much Arabic, so like I was pretending I don't speak much Arabic so that they won't make me talk in Arabic all the time. Oh God.
So you do speak Arabic.
شوية. شوية.
I see.
If you speak Arabic, you'll know what that means.
Right.
I lived in Morocco, and before that I was more familiar with the Syrian dialect, and then I studied, the standard dialect in school. So when I talk, I'm using all those dialects together, and it's ridiculous. Really, no one understands me when I speak Arabic, but I understand them.
So Justin, I mean, so did you know that he had this idea of writing this book, and were you aware of it, and how did you, like, if you were aware of it, and if you were part of his writing journey from the beginning, like, what was your first impression when you heard that he's having this idea to write a book?
I mean, I guess my first impression was kind of just like, oh yeah, right, correct. That's gonna happen. Just because, Josh lives in literature, to a pretty substantial extent, and he lives in this historical literature, and a lot of his, literally like a lot of his day-to-day practices and a lot of his day-to-day, the things that we talk about and stuff are kind of informed some way or other by the historical contents that inform the book. So when he told me that he was going to write the book, it wasn't really surprising, no. And I mean, I thought it was pretty exciting, honestly, because Josh is a very eccentric person, as most people can probably tell from the book. The book is very, there's no holds barred. It's like the whole, I don't know, the funny and beautiful parts of humanity and the totally wretched and like grimy parts of humanity, all of it is in there, which I think is something to respect. It's something that you have to get used to. If you're not used to that, it can be, a hurdle, as it were, something to overcome. But I honestly have always had like a deep respect for that kind of realism, because honestly, you read the things and they're very graphic and they're very sort of unhindered, but that's just kind of how real life is. Obviously we live in different contexts and we're exposed to different things, so some people aren't ready for what's coming in the book, but I don't know, I think if you're up to the challenge, then you'll be all the better for it.
If you read past page 30, you're going to read the whole thing, so don't worry about it being too long.
Yeah,
it's
super interesting the whole time. I honestly think so, and I think the realism, all of the inhibition that you can see through these words makes it even more interesting, makes it more compelling. So yeah.
I mean, like, you know what, I think Killetz was right. Like, if you go past, like, probably as page 30, page, probably like, page 50, you would see where the story is actually going, and you would want to read more. So that's what I felt, because I felt that despite the book being graphic, I thought, like, wow, he has done a tremendous amount of effort, and he's put a lot of effort in making sure that you are in that era, like, in that era, and going through what people would have gone through back then, like, to really be in that zone, be in that moment. So that made me feel like, um it's really interesting to see how characters would have been back then, right? And that's what made me glued to the book and to finishing it up and to really see where it goes according to his imagination, of course, right? But I also knew that he has done a lot of research. A lot of research has been put to make this book not just a fiction one, but also something that is very relatable back then, many years ago. So that's what I really liked about it, and I know that it is graphic, and again, that's what I think people should know, because if you want to know how people lived back then, you have got to have, or you have got to keep an open mind
Yeah.
to really, am I right to say that, like,
No,
you've got to keep
I
an open
think
mind.
a lot of literature about history cleans up some of the more, you know what I mean,
Uncomfortable.
of the history. Of course, besides, that Roman stuff where it just revels in it, like,
Correct.
oh, Caligula, he did the dirty with his sister, and he opened her belly and ate the baby. But
Uh-huh.
that was a big inspiration for me, actually. The novel I, Claudius by Robert Graves, classic. And I like how it felt true to the time, but also relatable, and that's sort of what I was going for. And of course,
Mhm.
it's about the same, takes place about the same time as like the book of Exodus in the Bible.
Mhm.
So it's hard to say, because like the Bible is ultimately a work of fiction,
Mhm.
mostly, especially dealing with these periods. But when obviously in the Bible they're like, those filthy Canaanites, they kill their babies, so we must kill them, including their babies, because
Uh-huh.
those babies are sinful.
Uh,
Yeah. That-
right. So how do you after the book is out, like, I was just wondering, Justin, were you like one of the beta readers? Did you get the chance to go through his manuscript before it's published? And yeah.
Yeah. I did go through the manuscript a bit before it was published. So I don't know where I came
Mhm.
in the list of people who beta read the content, like if I was
Uh-huh.
the first or the last or wherever, somewhere in the middle. But I was one of the people who read the manuscript. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I I didn't really have. I feel like I didn't really have much criticism necessarily about um, the content at that stage, just because I kind of know that how, what's the word, how deeply that work is sort of seated in Josh's whole being, and
Mhm.
I have deep faith in his knowledge and his you know competency when it comes to writing and making
Mhm.
things interesting. And I was already able to tell that it was going to be like a truly sort of unique and compelling work at that time, when
Mhm.
I read the manuscript. So yeah, but I was honored to be one of the people who got to read it before it came out. So thanks for that, Josh. I appreciate it.
Yep.
So Killetz, tell us about. I'm sure you've actually, like, made a lot of preparation. Probably you sent it for editing. You had to like polish the manuscript a few times, and
Mhm.
tell us the whole process of publishing this, self-publishing versus traditionally published. Like, the options that you have to go through.
Mhm.
Yeah, probably tell us, share your experience with us.
Well, very early on, I kind of realized that I don't think I would have a lot of options for traditional publishing for this kind of book, especially. I don't know. I mean,
Uh-huh.
especially for a new author. I had written before, mostly like he's saying other books, really screenplays, because I
Mhm.
actually had a background more in like film and animation, which is why it kind of is written a little bit like a movie. It's
Mhm.
very, sort of got that punchiness. But what was I saying? What was I saying? What were we talking about?
Publishing.
Publishing.
Oh, about publishing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did hire someone to help me with the publishing, and I've gotten a certain amount of sales, although they kind of stalled out by now. I'm waiting for the people who bought the book to leave the reviews that pushes more people in, you know. But so far, it's only gotten 5-star reviews, actually, and you saw that the screen. So I have high hopes for that. Yeah, self-publishing is still quite difficult, although with Amazon it does make the costs much lower.
And speaking about reaching out to your target audience, right? Like, what are the efforts that you have made so far? Because it is really important. It's really crucial to put yourself out there to the
know.
right audience.
And that's always been a big challenge for me because as far as like social media is concerned, I'm a little bit socially medially challenged, as you can tell.
Lives in the
I tried to run some ads on Amazon, so you know, but the issue is it's kind of an obscure period to begin with. I feel like the people who are going to read it, they're going to love it. But getting people to read it, getting people to buy it, that's the hard thing. Some people they want the Rome stuff, or they want the Christian stuff, or they want whatever like that, or they want the romance with the shirtless guy. I was actually kind of tempted to use a humorous version of that, where it has like a picture of a real human's like shirtless chest, and then like a clay figure's head on top of it. Like, and the title, 3 Sexy Pimps. As the 3 pimps, Milky, Lou, Aradano, and Yapaho. Shirtless, of course, and very muscular. But I went with something more dignified. Unfortunately, with my design, actually, people like the design, but it looks too serious. It looks like nonfiction. And it doesn't look as fun as the book actually is. So I'm thinking if I go and do another design for the cover, it might do better if I did something that sort of shows that this is a little bit not totally like serious nonfiction, tongue-in-cheek, maybe a little wink at the audience, just so they know that it has that spice, you know, that sizzle, that Kenite flavor.
So, I mean, I have to agree that, you know, when it comes to marketing, right, it has to be done in the right way to make sure that people get a glimpse of what the book is all about, right? So, and I understand the difficulties that come with it, because your book is not something that is like you said, it's in the middle, like, you know, it's not totally cultural, it's not totally, so you have kind of like a mixture of everything there. You have spices, like you said, you have that, you know, spice, you have the element of culture, you have a lot of things going on, and I think that's where people can think that your book is purely something that is cultural, purely something that is historical, and they probably think that it is going to be really boring, right? And that's where,
I mean, a lot of these books about Canaanite topics, I'll be honest, they're often quite boring. I've read most of them. I know some of them are not boring, but these are not always the most historically accurate ones. So I wanted to strike a balance between historically accurate and that kind of spice. You know, I don't know. I'm always talking about food. I just like cooking. That's one of the things I like doing.
right. So yes, you were saying about reviews, and I think reviews are really important. How do you are you a part of, like, you know, you said social media it's not really, most people are not really comfortable putting themselves out there on social media and marketing it for doing the marketing themselves, right? So I think that's where the challenge comes in, and that's where the challenge to reach out to the audience, to the right audience, arise, right? So far, do you know who your audience are? Like, do you know who your readers are, apart from your family and friends, immediate family and friends? Do you know which method is working so far for you? Who's buying the book?
I think the people who are buying the book are generally people who are interested in history, or more serious, more rigorous historical fiction, rather than that sort of fruity, like, romantic historical fiction. I also think, well, like, my best day of sales was the same day as Passover, so I was thinking, like, maybe all the Jews are like, Passover, ancient Egypt. I'm interested in ancient Egypt. Let's read a book about ancient Egypt.
Uh-huh.
Oh, look, here's a book about ancient Egypt. And he seems to be a member of the tribe. How interesting. And I got some sales from that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It's just a tough sell because it's so unlike anything that exists.
Mm-hmm.
That's the hard part about it. I tried to invent a new genre, really.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of my MO.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's not like other stuff for the most. It's inspired in some cases by other stuff, but it's not in any recognizable genre other than in the broad category of historical fiction.
Yes. And so far, your readers, I mean, the ones that your family and friends, your immediate family members, your friends, what kind of feedback that you've gotten so far, and how do you feel about it? Like, once the book is out and people read, come back to you, what did they say?
I think from the people who've read it, the feedback is overwhelmingly positive. People who know about Kohan Killetz, like the Kohan Killetz YouTube channel, know that they don't know what to expect in terms of quality. I could take a lot of effort to put something together, or I could just put on like a video camera and just make this weird thing that's somehow sometimes very funny and sometimes just bizarre and awful. But people who know me and they know my work, they are universal in saying that I don't fall into all the pitfalls I normally fall into with my work. They can tell what's going on. It has a story. It has a lot of characters to set up, but they all come together at the end, and bang those dolls together. A couple big battles, a lot of emotion, humanizing people from history.
And here is your and you mentioned about your YouTube channel, and therefore I'm gonna share the screen and let people see your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
I just found it. So give me a sec. So this is
Might
your
be the most
YouTube
exciting part.
channel. So you've got a lot of videos on history of basically on history, Canaanite history. Wow, you've got a lot of things over here, and I think it is apart from the book. I think this is going to be really educational in terms of people who wants to learn more about history, and also probably when they watch these videos, I think they will get a sense of what the book is all about, and a deeper sense of what it is all about. Because I
At
think it is
least the
all
videos I
very much.
choose to show in front of people. I have, like, obviously my channel is, people know it from the history, but it has all sorts of weird random stuff that I've since chosen not to focus because it doesn't get the views, but people like the history stuff, so that's what I focus on.
Mm-hmm. And yeah. So it's all about. I mean, I think you pretty much, your stuff. Like you
Yeah.
the book, like Justin said. I think from your channel over here, and people can see how much you are really into history, the Canaanite religion. Yeah. So we've got a lot of series over here, like El Amarna letters. So what is this all about,
Okay,
Kohan?
so
Like,
the Amarna letters is the #1 primary source for the book. I don't
uh-huh.
actually have all of them up. It's obviously I kind of got tired of reading them when they weren't getting a lot of views. But the basis of the Amarna letters, like I explained earlier, is these clay tablets written in Akkadian, like this language of diplomacy, that was sent
Mm-hmm.
between all the different kings. Specifically, these ones to the king of Egypt, the pharaoh Akhenaten, and his father Amenhotep III, detailing like all the diplomacy, all the wars, asking for gifts. Oh, give me some gold. Send me beautiful women.
Uh-huh.
Send me some silver. A lot of
Uh-huh.
a lot of that, but then a lot of really interesting stuff. One of the characters that sort of comes through a lot in this, which is barely mentioned in the book because I feel like he deserves like a story of his own,
Mm-hmm.
is the character of Rib Hada, who's trying to hold the city of Byblos in Lebanon. It's
Mm-hmm.
constantly being attacked, and things just keep getting worse and worse for him. And he's talking to the pharaoh, like, "Please send me men, send me food." And the pharaoh's like, just ignores him because
Uh-huh.
the pharaoh's too busy, worshiping the sun or whatever. And I'm not
Uh-huh.
making that up. It's to like handle what his vassals are going through.
And some of your videos have gotten like really
Well, that's
um
not my video. I just
okay.
accidentally put that in my playlist.
Playlist, yes. Like, but you have like 1.2 k views. You have like this is like 1,000 views. So, and you know what's interesting about YouTube? It's the comments, right? Like you may have uploaded a video like 5 6 months ago, and suddenly people watch it and they comment, and you get this notification saying that somebody enjoyed it.
Mhm.
Have you gotten those kind of experience? And how do I mean, like, just like books, right? Like, I think YouTube videos are also a way to express yourself, and when people can
Mhm.
relate to you, I think you feel really good. And have you ever come across like those kind of
Oh,
comments?
like every once in a while, someone will come and say, "I love this video." You know, for my for the amount of work, though, it's not really proportional. Like my reward is definitely not proportional to the amount of work I put into some of these videos, especially the animated ones. Of course, a lot of that has to do with the fact that I wasn't necessarily as fastidious about the quality of them.
Mm-hmm.
It is generally very difficult to do clay animation.
Mm-hmm.
I think,
Mm-hmm.
but the people who are into that are really into that.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you know a little bit about clay animation, or not necessarily the animation part of it, but just kind of like what it takes to make one of these figures, and you see his videos, I think that you can't help but being kind of blown away because the level of detail
Mm.
in the figures, and it's really cool when you have the opportunity to see them in person, is absolutely amazing. So you know, I don't know. There's an audience. There's an audience at this point
It
Mm.
already.
just needs to, connect to the right people,
Mm.
and
Mm.
then I feel like it will build up because people who are just as weird and as crazy as me, they have a sort of magnetism. I think
Yeah.
just needs a little bit of electricity, and all the metal is going to come flying across the room like shrapnel and stick in people's heads. The people shooting over to being attracted to what I do.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
I never, caught fire in terms of like popularity.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if people knew about what I do, it's part of the reason why I do these like interviews, then I think it would catch on pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think the book will definitely help for sure, because the book is I guess, you know, it's literature, so in a sense it might be a little bit more accessible for, well, definitely for a certain audience that might not be as interested in the animation part of things, but you know, obviously the animation and the literature is all connected. So
Connected.
Yeah, it's like obviously the Canaanites are not that famous right now, which is quite sad because you know their outsized impact on history as far as like inventing everything that we literally use, like agriculture and the alphabet and all this stuff. But it just, but the people who do know about the Canaanite stuff, I'm the guy for the Canaanite stuff. So especially in the Canaanite religion sort of crowd. Weird, crazy people, even by my standards.
And you and you know what? Things like hashtags, things like commenting on channels that are related to you will also help you to increase the visibility, your visibility among that genre, people who love doing the same thing, right? So and also some people would love to be the person of authority in Quora, like, you know, answering questions related to specific niche topics like on Quora, and they would in the long run, I think the aim is to project themselves as the expert or probably authority in what they do, and I think that also helps to increase branding as a whole. Like, you know, that's what it is all about. And when you mention about, I have to agree that when you mention about connecting with the right people, it is really crucial to, I mean, from my experience using Instagram, it is really crucial to be mindful about who we follow and who we choose to, like, you know, whose videos we comment on, whose content we comment on, because I think that as a whole connects you with it's like magnetic, just like what you said, it's magnetic, and it connects you from with people who love what you do. So I think it's all about being in the right frequency and matching with those people who has interest as you, right? And so talking about books and talking about your videos over here, do you have any upcoming ideas to any other books after this? Are you in the process of writing it? So tell us a little bit about that. What's your plan so far?
Like as soon as I finished the first draft of 7 Times and 7 Times I Bow, I was like, I'm still interested, so I'm gonna keep writing. So I wrote the sequel, and I'm editing it now, called Hail Like the Sun, which has a lot of the same characters, but in several more years, like 5 to 10 more years, and it explores some more wider conflicts with the Egyptians and the Hittites and all that, and the fall of the Mitanni Empire, which is, you know, depressing but fun, and also, you know, tyranny as a concept, and a lot of religious stuff, sort of like how tyrants use religion to manipulate people. I thought that's a fun subject matter for a book. It's obviously related to the first one as a sequel, but I wanted to make it sort of stand on its own and have sort of like different but related themes.
Right. So, Justin,
yeah,
are you like excited for his new upcoming book, and what do you have to say to him? Somebody said hi over here. Hello.
oh, yeah. I'm most definitely excited for the upcoming book. I'm excited for everything else into the future that Josh does, because I think it's just going to get more and more refined. It's going to get more and more sort of yeah, more and more detailed, more and more colorful, and more, deeper, because this is only the start. It's only going to get bigger from here. He's only going to get more and more knowledgeable, and with feedback, via feedback and exposure via interviews like this,
Mm-hmm.
and then Amazon and such, and all of the platforms that he's functioning on right now. Yeah, the base for creativity is just going to grow. So I'm very much looking forward to the sequel. And yeah, I mean, I just, I tell Josh, just keep going, and you don't have to tell Josh to keep going. He's going to keep going anyway. He's already editing the sequel, if that says anything. So yeah,
Uh-huh.
I'm looking
So,
forward to it.
do you have like any sort of could you guess what's going to happen in the sequel or something like that? Justin, do you have anything in mind?
Actually, I don't even want to guess,
Uh-huh.
because I want it to be completely fresh for
Uh-huh.
all of the readers who
Mm.
are going to be floored by it when
Mm.
it comes. So I'm gonna leave that to fate and to our good friend Josh here to show us what's
Now, there's going to be some fun new characters in the sequel with some fun new names like Matiwaza. What a lovely
Mm.
name! I would name myself Matiwaza, but then I wrote all the stuff that Matiwaza actually does in the book, and I'm like, maybe not. And there's Shupiluliuma. That's a lovely name. Very important historical figure. For anyone who knows about the Hittites, a fun character as well. We see more of Sutarna. We see his relationship with Etakama, his son-in-law, and anyone who knows about my background in film will recognize the name Etakama. So, for
Mhm.
people who know me, this will be exciting, and hopefully for people who read the first book, this will be exciting too. Go in a
Mhm.
new direction, expand the world, add all the spicy flavors.